Welcome everyone to Arena Talks episode 2. Thank you guys so much for coming back for another video. Just want to say quickly, thank you so much for the support on the first video. It was really overwhelming. So a massive thank you. So today we're going to talk about the academy fixtures from the weekend, looking at the under-18s victory versus Leeds to start with, and then move on to the 21s game against Sunderland. There's a lot of talking points from their under-18s game, not just because of the goals. There was quite a controversial moment towards the end of the game, which has been causing a bit of a stir online, so I thought I'd give my opinions on that. And yeah, just looking at, similarly to the last video, looking at some of the best performances from that game and analysing some of the goals and some of the things that I noticed from that game. Obviously, the 21s game wasn't on MUTV and there hasn't been any highlights released at the moment, so there's a limited amount of things that I can talk about in that game, but there are a few talking points which I think would be quite interesting to look at. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's look at the under-18s lineup to start with then. So just briefly, because there's not a lot I want to talk about, but there's a couple of things. Musa comes in for Chido. Chido drops to the bench because his hat-trick last weekend clearly wasn't good enough to get him a start. No, guys, look, seriously. So I'm doing a Frank Lampard here, but it's important at this level that you develop all players. Just because you think you might have a potential first teamer on your hands, it doesn't mean that you should give them all of the minutes. Minutes at this level should be distributed healthily to everyone so that you give everyone a good chance to develop. And in Chido's case, particularly, he is clear of this level. It's so obvious in the minutes that I've watched of him so far, and factoring in his games for Arsenal last season, he doesn't need to be playing at this level. And the only reason that he is, I think, is because he's trying to gain full fitness so that he can play 21s football and potentially first team, right? That's the goal for him. Another change then, so Mantato comes in for Lacey. Good to see him back. He's been away with England's under-17, so that's why he's been out a couple of the last few squads. Unfortunately, though, no sign of Lacey for the under-18s or 21s this weekend. I have it on good authority, or at least from someone that I trust, that he's picked up a small knock, and that's why he was out. Big shame for him. He's by far my favourite player to watch in the academy, so whenever he's not playing or involved, it's a shame, right? But hopefully it's a small knock, should be back pretty soon. Lastly then, no Jayce Fitzgerald, as of course he was with the first team. Huge achievement for him. I remember the first time I watched him was about 2 years ago. It was at the Super Cup in Northern Ireland, a pre-season tournament for the under-16s. He was playing centre-back in that tournament, even though he's a midfielder, and he was a class above in that tournament. He was fantastic, and yeah, I mean, every time he plays for the under-18s, he is magnificent. And I know he's only 17, but I was really gutted that he didn't get his debut the other night against Leicester. We were 3 goals up and the game was won, and I thought it had been perfect opportunity for Rue to bring him on, along with Fletcher, along with Amas, with 5 minutes to go when the game's already won. Just picture it, guys. The camera pans to the bench. You've got Fletcher, Amas, and Fitzgerald all warming up with the substitute board going above them to make it 2-5-2, 2-5-3, and 2-5-4 of academy debuts. That would have been a special moment, but Rue didn't fancy it, fair enough, but given Fitzgerald's quality and how good he is and how young he is, I really do think that he could be one of those players that makes a first-team debut in the future, so I'm not too worried. Let's get back to the game then. So 8-0, Scanlon with a hat-trick and Amir Ibragimov with a hat-trick as well. Let's start with Scanlon. So this is a really interesting discussion, and it's something that I've been trying to wrap my head around for a couple of weeks. Why is Scanlon playing for the under-18s? And I've been trying to come up with plausible reasons. He's someone that I said at the start of the season should not be playing under-18s football. I felt that last season, through his numbers and through his importance to the treble-winning season, that he was above that level now and that he should move up. And I've been trying to think, why has he not moved up? And the reason I gave at the start of the season is that there was more senior wingers in his positions for the 21s. So, for example, Ethan Ennis, Sam Mather, Malachi Sharp. These are sort of the players that would take his minutes had he move up. But there have been a few occasions this season where he could have at least been on the bench, right? Or started. There have been plenty of games, and he's still playing for the under-18s consistently every week. He's got 10 goals and 4 assists this season. And again, he's kind of showing that goal scoring form and the contribution numerically for the team. So it goes back to the question again, why is he playing for the under-18s? Now, This is my theory, and it could be completely wrong, and it's just an observation that I had when I've been trying to think, why is he still playing for them? So last season, I want to talk about a game specifically. So the 9-0 against Liverpool last season, he also scored a hat-trick, right? And I remember doing a video on him that game, a sort of compilation of his performance, and the clip came to about 2 minutes and 20 seconds. It was no more than that, right? And you'd think that when someone scores a hat-trick in a game, the compilation of them is going to be quite long. That tends to happen, right? If you're going to score 3 goals, plus all the other actions in the game, it's going to be quite a long video, but it only came to about 2.5 minutes. And I remember finishing that video and thinking, apart from those 3 goals, he didn't do much. He scores a hat-trick, unbelievable, right? To do that is you can't criticize that. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that there are certain games where you want to see him more involved, other than the goals and the assists, right? The general play. And maybe that's something that's going on here. The club is saying he's too good for this level. We know he is. We know he's going to put up numbers, but we want him to get better at his overall game in terms of having an influence other than the goals and the assist. Being that player that can get on the ball 50, 60 times a game and link play with other players and control the game himself. And rather than it be a case of if he doesn't score or doesn't assist, he doesn't have a good game. Because you don't want that. And I think that's maybe what's going on here, is that they want his overall game to improve. And maybe the club think that environment with the under-18s will bring about that result more effectively than the 21s. The players are younger, they're less athletic, they're less experienced than 21s. So Scanlon, on the opposite end of the spectrum, has played under-18s football for 3 years now. He's a lot fitter, he's a lot quicker. He's more senior than the players that he plays with, so he can demand more respect, right? It's an environment where he can flourish a bit more in terms of his overall game. So, like I said, it could be complete nonsense what I'm talking about, but it's just something that I thought of. And to reference kind of the point I'm trying to make here also, he played against Tottenham a couple of weeks back in the Premier League Cup. He didn't score, he didn't assist, and it was probably one of his worst games that I've seen of him in the last 3 years. Now, he is someone that is very, very consistent, and he's a player that, like I said, usually gets involved in some sense for goals and assists. But this game, he didn't, but he was on the ball all the time, and things weren't working out for him. His shots were getting blocked, his passes were being intercepted, he was a bit sloppy on the ball, he was getting tackled and wasn't dribbling past players. So everything that went wrong, but it was really promising to see how much he got on the ball and how much he was bringing other people into the game. And that's something that I want to see more of, because if he can, we have a really, really good player on our hands here. And I felt we did see that on the weekend against Leeds. He got the 3 goals, but he was also really, really involved and had a big, big presence on the game itself. So Scanlon was a massive positive from the game. Next, I want to talk about Amir. Amir is someone that we've known about for quite a long time now. We've all seen the clips from social media of his goals in under-16s level, and the skills and the crazy celebrations. He's a player that is sort of very well hyped on social media, and he's been in and out of under-18s football for a couple of seasons. He's had injuries. It's been quite stop-start, right? But this season, you can really tell now, starting this season, he's starting to gain some rhythm and gain some momentum. So when we've seen him play for the under-18s and the 21s in previous seasons, he's been on the periphery, right? He hasn't been scoring, hasn't really been getting involved. But what you can tell now is he's really starting to put a stamp down on this team. He's starting consistently in that number 10 role. He looks to be past his injury problems, and he's starting to put up the numbers as well. He's got 8 goals and assists this season. And linking it back to the discussion that we had about Scanlon just now, he's having an influence as well on the game. If you look back at the fixture from last weekend, the under-18s fixture, he ended up having 1 goal, but he could have had 3 or 4 in that game had he gotten a bit more fortunate with some of the finishes. And that's a good thing, that players are missing chances. Of course, you'd rather them score, but the fact that he's getting in those positions and he's not on the periphery anymore. So Amir was my man of the match by far, right? And I mentioned in the intro that there was a talking point from that game, and it involved Amir. So he actually scored a chance that Chido thought was his goal. So there was a moment in the game where Chido went round the goalkeeper, I believe, and sort of squared it across goal. It wasn't going in, but from Chido's angle, he thought it was, and Amir tapped it in, rightfully so, right? Rightfully so. The ball didn't look like it was going in. And you could see Amir run over to sort of the group that are celebrating, and Chido has a little word with him, and he puts his hands on his head and sort of goes like that, right? Like he's annoyed. And there's been a lot of criticism directed towards Chido after that moment. And all I can say is I've not played football at a very high level, right? But I do know from the level that I have played is that these things are pretty normal on a football pitch, especially with people that age, right? We often forget that these are kids essentially that are playing. You know, Chido's 16, Amir is 16. So it's normal to have these kind of bickering situations on a football pitch. Chido's a striker. He wants to score goals. That's his job, and he's gotten pretty used to it recently. So I'm not particularly too bothered about kind of his want to score goals. If he looks at that back, he might regret sort of the way he acted a little bit, because ultimately the ball that he was putting across wasn't going in, so Amir had every right to go for it, and they were probably fine after the match. You can look at it both ways. You can look at it in a sense of that Chido needs to be spoken to because he needs to be more of a team player and appreciate that it's not just about him. But on the other side of things, you can look at it positively and think, this guy is so obsessed with scoring, and that's what you want as a striker. You want nothing else than your striker, that when he's put through on goal, he's not thinking, oh, well, who can I square it to here? I'm thinking, no, I'm going to score. But the key thing is about being confident and not selfish, and that's the main takeaway here. I think it was a situation that got blown out of proportion online, on social media, shock, and it's something that I'm sure if the coaches feel like there's a problem there, they will discuss it with him, and that's none of our business. But to cap it off with Amir, really, really happy with his performances and how he's progressing. Looks really, really positive. And what I'm really interested to see is how Adam Lawrence potentially fits him into the FA Youth Cup squad, right? Because there are so many options right now of players that he could pick. And if Amir continues playing like this, there's going to be a bit of a discussion around who's starting and who's starting where. So I might talk about that in a future video, my preferred FA Youth Cup side. It might be by the time that I've done it that there have been a few more games and I could sort of come to a better conclusion. So watch out for that video. Let's end it on the 21s then. So a disappointing result, but nonetheless, a couple of positives I want to touch on. Gabe Biancheri scoring again. That's 15 goals for the season. And one really, really good thing about the goals that he's scoring, there's two things actually. So number one, he's scoring in all age groups. He's scoring for the under-18s, he's scoring in the UEFA Youth League, and he's scoring for the 21s, right? And that's a really good sign. It's not a case of he's playing under-18s football and just stat padding that level, and then as soon as he moves up, he can't replicate it, right? That's not the case. The second positive thing that I've noticed about the goals that he's scoring is that he's creating opportunities for himself, and he's scoring in situations where he's having to do quite a lot of work. A big chunk of his goals that he scored last season were down to his really high attacking IQ and getting into positions to score for tap-ins. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but it limits your ceiling of how good you can be as a striker, and it also depends on the chances that your teammates create. Whereas this season, you can see that the goals that he's scoring are a lot more individual, and he's scoring in scenarios that you wouldn't expect a striker to score in. And that's a trait that's going to really help him when he transitions into senior football. So, yeah, like I said, Gabe, massive positive, and really, really happy with his season. I think he's probably going to end on 25 goals. I'll say 25 goals, and if he scores more, fair play to him. Another thing from that game that really, really pleased me when I saw it was Sekou Kone finally getting his debut. It's been a long time. I'm not sure why it's taken so long. There's been articles, obviously, in The Athletic that have been suggesting that United want to be very slow with his progression and make sure that he's settling into Manchester and the culture and the way of living and the club and all this sort of stuff. So that might have something to do with it. I also read that he could have been injured when he joined, so I'm not particularly sure. It might be a mashup of the two, but really, really pleased to see him get his debut. I've heard that he was very, very bright when he came on, and the under-21s manager, Travis Binion, actually highlighted that in his interview after the game and said that Kone came on and made a difference and looked very good. So that's really pleasing to hear. So I did an article on Sekou Kone's move to Manchester United a couple of months back. I'd been told reliably that the club was very impressed by Sekou Kone initially at a tournament in France. It was a biannual tournament where African teams and African players go over to France and participate in a tournament. And fortunately, United scouts were at that tournament. I've been told that they requested a trial. Kone's club rejected that trial offer, so United kept in tabs with his performances and how he was getting on. They then watched him at the Under-17s World Cup, where he had a fantastic tournament and was in the team of the tournament. And they felt at that point then it was time to pull the trigger, because there were other clubs circling at that point, and they felt that they've lost out on so many talents in previous years under the Glazers that Ineos felt the time was now and that the deal needed to be done swiftly. And they did it, so fair play to them. I've been informed also by that person who gave me this information. They've said that United are looking to do a similar signing, so a signing of that ilk in the January transfer window. So someone in that age bracket with a lot of talent and someone that can raise the potential of the team. And I love how Ineos are moving right now. They're really listening to the scouts and really considering their reports. And if you look at the spine that we could potentially have in a couple of years, you've got Yoro at centre-back, you've got potentially Mainu and Kone, if Kone lives up to the potential that he's supposedly got. And then you've got Chido up front, all these talents in the academy. It just looks really exciting at the moment, and I love it. We're going to leave it there, folks. Thank you so much for joining me again. My next video, I would like to do a Q&A. I've put some questions out on Twitter that you guys gave me a lot of responses to, so thank you so much for that. I think that'll be my next video. It's entirely academy related, so it's all academy questions, so look out for that. Again, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for joining me again for another video. Take care and good night.